Sportsfriends is a collection of 4 multiplayer games made by 4 game designers. We sat down with them and asked them about what went into making their games.
Now we are taking a look at Super Pole Riders by Bennett Foddy, who you might know from making Clop and Clop and a bunch of other games where you can't really control things that well. This is a game about competitive pole vaulting, which is also kind of like a death sport.
Right.
What made you decide pole vaulting was the perfect sport for you to tackle?
You know, what I wanted to do was make a straightforward, realistic pole vaulting game like you have in summer games, or all those kind of Olympics sports games from the 80s. And, you know, I built it out, and it turns out it's just not that interesting just to vault over a bar in a video game. But, you know, it's kind of it's one of the tricks that game designers do. If it's not really working out for one player, you put another player in, suddenly you're having more fun. And, you know, I had to kind of solve the problem of what that would mean, why they're vaulting around. So added a ball. And now
when in doubt, add a ball.
Right, exactly. You had to add goals, and then you had to add a sort of reason to be using your pole vault. So I put the ball suspended from a wire that hangs in between the two goals. And that's the kind of the basics of what Pole Riders is. So this is a remake of my Flash version of the game from scratch. It's like new art, new levels, and crucially new analog controls for the poles. So you're in much more control now. You're able to kind of use it for jumping and for defense, for pushing the ball, for standing up on the end of the pole. So that's the kind of essence of what the game is.
And you know, it's funny because pole vaulting is always such a weird sport physically, right? Like you've got the flop,
right,
which was controversial when it was introduced into the sport, and it's the kind of thing that you think, all right, you can watch football and imagine yourself acquiring those skills, and you can watch baseball, imagine yourself being able to do that stuff. But pole vaulting is like, hey, I really need to go somewhere by myself for like 10 years and learn how to do this.
Right, and maybe break your neck in the process.
So yeah, it already feels fantastical, but then you add all this other stuff on top of it.
Yeah.
Like, was there a ceiling where you said, okay, I can't do this, like with pole vaulting?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is a sport that could never exist in real life. But Terry Kavanagh, who made Super Hexagon, was trying to convince me that for promotional reasons we should act this out. I'm pretty sure that you would die. These guys have the advantage of having infinitely strong arms, and also they can't rotate and kind of fall on their heads. So they've got, they're kind of superhuman in that regard. This is a sport that could only exist in fantasy.
And what have been the challenges in making this like competitive? Like how do you make it so that one player doesn't automatically coast to a win at any given time?
Right. Well, I mean, there's a lot of systems in here that you might not notice if you were just sort of playing it for the first time. So, for example, the ball, because it's hanging on this high tension wire, it rolls back away from the goal. So that's one kind of thing, so that you don't wind up having to dig it out from being close to the goal. You've got a certain pressure to kick it a few times or to push it quite heavily to get it to the goal. So that's the kind of thing that's in there. You might also notice that we set the goals up on backboards on some of these levels that the players can go past but the ball can't, and that stops you from standing there just holding the pole up as a kind of defensive measure. But when you get good at this game, you really start to kind of go into the flow of the physics, and you can kind of predict where the pole is going to go and where the ball is going to go, and you start to kind of it's still kind of awkward, like all of my games. It's like the pole is 10 times as heavy as the guy. So he's really having to kind of work to push that thing around, and you have to kind of go with it. You can't fight against it too much.
It's interesting because you mentioned your games have been primarily single player experiences before, and you've had to kind of fight against yourself, right? Like your own muscles and whatever. And this is something where I imagine you've had to make it flow a little bit easier.
Right.
Just so you can get the players playing against themselves and not against like the mechanics.
Right, that was something I learned from the Flash version. I guess when you watch people playing the Flash version, the original version of Pole Riders, they're having a good time, but they're not really, it takes them a long time to get to the point where they're able to play it with skill. And because of the gamepad and the way that I've set up the control scheme, I think people get to a point quicker where they're able to do what they want to do. It's still weird. I mean, pole vaulting is a weird skill, right? You have to push a pole down to get your body to go up. So it's kind of the opposite of the way we normally think about video games. You push up to go up, you push right to go right. So it's still not that. You still are having to kind of learn about the system. But I think it is like, it's more of a kind of competitive game now. Having said that, I think this is maybe the least video gamey of the 3 couch games that we have in this package. It's the most, in some ways, the most accessible to beginners.